Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. We saw that Jesus uttered those words to Peter and Andrew and James and John, and they then followed him, literally left their nets and everything and came and followed him. And we saw that Peter, later on, after a man said, hey, I want to be your disciple too, I want to have eternal life, and Jesus says, well, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. Just leave your estate and all your material things, leave those behind and come with me. And the man couldn't do that. And Peter says, well, we've left everything, which they did. What do we get? And Jesus then says, yeah, indeed, you have followed me. You have come. The whole point of all this is what we're seeing is when we come to the New Testament, follow, this idea of following Jesus in the Gospels is always taken very literally, of people literally walking behind somebody else or going where they're going. It's never that I sit at home and I've listened to Jesus teach at the Sermon on the Mount and now I'm following his teaching. It's not used in that sense. And as I've said, you can study that. You can check this all out. You can do a study and look up these words, follow, and look at all the places where it occurs. We're just hitting some of them. I want to look at one more passage before we leave the Gospels. I was going to move into the epistles and see how they use this word follow, but there's one more section in here that I thought would be important for us to take a look at, and it's in John chapter 13, and so we're going to put in here today. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher. We're talking about how we read our Bibles, and part of how we read our Bibles is paying attention to the words, the vocabulary, and actually looking at how those words are used. And part of that should educate us then on how we talk about Christian living. Because a lot of people say, I'm a Jesus follower, or I follow Jesus. And they think they're using biblical terminology, but they're actually using a different understanding of the terms that are used in Scripture. They're using it not in the way that God uses it. In John chapter 13 and verse 31, Jesus is in the upper room. He's shared Passover with these people. Judas has just left. And Jesus, as he's looking at this, verse 31, therefore when he, Judas, had gone out, Jesus said, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in or by him. If God is glorified in him, then God will also glorify him in him or by himself, and will glorify him immediately. Little children. So he's looking at these guys as they're just, from the perspective of the truth that he's about to give them, they're like little kids sitting on the floor looking up at this adult trying to explain these things, and they're not going to get most of what he says at that moment. They will get it afterwards, and Jesus even seems to indicate as much in this. But he says, little children, I am with you for a little while longer. And you will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. Then he gives them the new commandment in verses 34 and 35. I honestly think if you listen to Peter, Peter didn't even hear the new commandment. He's stuck on this, I'm going somewhere and you can't come. See, they'd been following Jesus now for the better part of 3 years. And all of a sudden Jesus says, you can't follow me where I'm going. And then he says, here's this new commandment I'm giving you. And Peter's like, but not going. And I think this is just my opinion, but I think Peter misses this new commandment. He doesn't get it at this moment. Verse 36, and Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I go, you cannot, notice this now, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me later. And when he uses this, you will follow me here, he actually says, you singular Peter. You singular Peter. And I think that there's a reason for this, and we'll bear that out in just a little bit. But he says, you will follow later. Peter said to him, Lord, why can't I follow you right now? I will lay down my life for you. And of course, we go on and look at this. Jesus said, will you really lay down your life for me? Now, I don't think Peter's being stupid when he says that he would do this. Elsewhere in the book of Luke, Jesus says, Satan has asked for all of you to sift you as wheat, but I've asked, and he goes to a singular you in the Greek, I've asked for you, Peter. And Peter was the one that ended up being sifted, and he was the one out of the 11 disciples that actually denies Jesus. John goes, it's interesting. John goes up there he's the one that gets Peter into the high priest's house where they can observe from a distance the trial. And it never tells us that John was attacked by these people, or not attacked, but had other people pointing and say, hey, you're one of his. It never tells us that John denied him. It was Peter. Peter was the one that was going through this temptation. So I just laying some of this to rest that we think Peter was stupid and arrogant. He just didn't know what it was like to really undergo a real attack, a real severe attack from Satan that would really addle his mind to have these people do this, and so made so afraid, which is Satan uses fear a lot in manipulating people, even believers, to do what he wishes. So, but the main point we're looking at is Jesus says you can't follow now, but you will follow later. Now, there's a couple of ways that it can be understood. I'm stuck with the fact that he uses a singular you here in Greek. You can't see that. We just have the word you in your modern English translations. But it is singular, and I do think he's pointing something at Peter. But I want to go down to the next chapter. I want to go to, pardon me. Let's just move down here to chapter 14. Peter's upset, and he says, do not let your heart be troubled. And he's talking to the whole group. He says, believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. There's many places to abide, to be at ease. If this were not so, I would not have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you. In other words, there's already many dwelling places, but I'm going to go get a place ready for you. I'm not going up there and just straightening up one of these places. I believe he's indicating very plainly, I'm going to go get a place ready for you guys, distinct from this, the ones that are already there. And if I go and prepare a place for you, then I'm going to come again so I can be with you. No, so I can receive you to myself, so that where I am. So I'm going to come again, and I'm going to take you to me, so that where I am, you may be also. Presumably, if you go back just in the context, to go to the place that I'm getting ready for you. There's a lot of people that I think I probably indicated this in previous videos on different topics, that there are people that come say, well, this is cryptic. This is hard. There's nothing hard to understand this. I understood this being a young grade school kid. It was very plain. Jesus is going to go get a place ready for me, and he's going to come back and get me so I can go to that place and be with him. That's pretty straightforward. But it's not a text that makes it hard then for a scholar or somebody that wants to handle the Bible in a really deep manner. And I hope I'm trying to impress you. When it comes to reading the Bible, we don't have to be deep. Most of what's in the Bible, it's right there. It's plain on the surface, but we're always trying to read something deeper, something, oh, you need to understand all this. And most of this is just straightforward. And this is one of the most straightforward texts there is. I'm going away. I'm going to get a place ready for you. Oh, no, okay. And then I'm going to come back and get you so you can be with me in that place, obviously, that I'm getting ready for you. I received you myself, that where I am, you may be also. Now, understanding that, I believe this is partly an answer to, you can't follow me now. Jesus is going to be departing. He's going to, I think his statement about, I'm going somewhere that you can't follow, part of that is referring to the fact that he at this moment is going to return to heaven. Now, not right now. It's going to be actually probably a little over 40 days here from this moment. But he's going to go away, go to heaven. But we will follow him at one point. He will return for us. And I don't think he's returning for us in death. I believe this is when he returns for us to snatch up the church, to rapture, or the word that Paul uses in 1 Thessalonians 4, to snatch us from this location. Snatch us up to be with him. So that's answer number one. But I think that there's also another answer that's very specific to Peter, and it kind of covers most of the rest of the disciples too, but it is really pointed at Peter. In John chapter 21. Now this is after Jesus has died on the cross and has been buried and is risen and is now appearing to his disciples at multiple times, and this is one of those appearances. And John introduces John 21, and there was another time that he appeared, and he goes on and talks about a time when Jesus appeared to the disciples when they were gone fishing, because Peter says, I'm going fishing. Verse 18, truly, truly, I say to you. And now he's been talking to Peter in the previous verses, speaking to Peter specifically. When you were younger, you used to gird yourself. Now, by that idea of girding yourself, is you got yourself dressed, you bound yourself up with all these people always wore these big wide fabric belts that they would wrap around the middle. Some of them had a leather belt, not like a belt like we wear, but something that kind of pulled their garments together. And then you walked wherever you wanted. And that's very important. This word wished, it's a word in the Greek meaning. It's what you wanted. It's what you desired. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else, another, will gird you, and they will bring you or take you where you do not want to go. Now what's this? Well, verse 19. Now this he said, signifying or giving as a sign by the kind of death that he, referring to Peter, would glorify God. And when he had spoken this to him, he said, follow me. Now I don't think the follow me here is, now follow my teachings. I believe the follow me here is going back, and it's referring to something that we just looked at back in chapter 13. I'm going someplace you can't follow now, but you will follow later. And I believe as he's talking to Peter here, you're going to die a death like I die. When he says, I'm going someplace and you can't follow right now, he's referring to his death. And he says, you're not all going to be put up on crosses with me right now. I'm going to be put up on a cross. This is if we kind of explain what he's getting at. I'm going to a cross. I'm going to be judged by tomorrow. At this time, I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be in the grave. And you're not going to follow me that way now. But you will follow me later. And Peter then is told how he's going to die. And he said to him, Jesus says, follow me. In other words, just do that. Just do what you're supposed to do here. And you're going to die this way, like I'm going to die. Peter's not stupid. He actually gets what he says, because at verse 20, Peter turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved. This would be John. These two guys run around quite a bit together. They'd been in a fishing business together and now have followed Jesus, and they're going to be companions, fellow apostles when the church starts. And he saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, the one who also had leaned back on his bosom at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? And so Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, Lord, well, what about this guy? What about this one here? John's following behind him. What about him? And Jesus said to him, if I want him to continue until I come, what is that to you? In other words, if it's my desire that he stick around until I return, in other words, what he's saying is, I'm not telling you when I'm coming back, but if it's what I want is for him to continue till I come back, what is that about you? See, we're always worried about, well, why does this person get to do this? And why does this person have this opportunity? And why does that person get to go there? And I'm stuck here. And there's all these kinds of things that people think, why do I have to go through this? They didn't go through this hard stuff. I went through this hard stuff. And people are always thinking about this. And he's going, well, you just told me how I'm going to die. What about this guy? How's he going to die? And the Lord says, hey, that's not your concern. Your concern is about you. Well, he's pointing at Peter. It's about you doing this. And so he says the same thing again. You follow me. You're going to go through the thing I'm going to go through. And church history does tell us that Peter was crucified, that the Romans crucified him, because Peter was a Jew, but he wasn't a Roman citizen like Paul. So he wasn't given the honor of being beheaded. The Romans did not normally crucify Roman citizens. They gave them the honor of being normally beheaded. But slaves and other people they didn't care about, and these other nations that they controlled, no, they'd crucify those people to make them examples. Verse 23, therefore, this saying went out among the brothers that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? So just clarifying, John, because this is John writing this, and he's going, Jesus never said I wasn't going to die. Let's just be clear on that. This is what he said. What if that's what I want? And the thing is, John didn't know if that's what God wanted for him or if that's what Christ wanted. But here's the point of all of this. As we've been thinking about this idea of following, looking at this word, just kind of demonstrating again how you can do a word study and look at all these places where it occurs and see, well, it has this. We saw in the Old Testament that sometimes that follow was very literal, and sometimes that follow in the Old Testament was figurative. But when we come over here to the New Testament, we haven't found a figurative sense of the word follow yet. All of the places where we've looked at follow to this point are all literally following. And this following here, Peter's literally going to follow Christ being crucified. Not at the moment Christ is, but a number of years later. We guess based on church history that Peter's crucified probably about 67 AD. So almost another 40 years after the time that Christ dies. Peter dies the same way. And that's how he followed him. And Jesus, and a couple lessons. Number one, follow still means literally coming where I'm going, except this time he can't see Jesus right in front of him, but I'm sure he knows that he'd seen Jesus go up there on the cross. He'd seen them probably from a distance put him on the cross, and he saw all that take place. And then when he's confronted with this in his life, he likewise going to follow, literally being crucified. Some people suggest that Peter said, I'm not worthy to be crucified like my Lord, so I chose to be crucified upside down. Whether or not that's true or whether that's legend, we don't know. But the evidence is that he was, at the very least, crucified. That's point number one, the significance of follow. Point number two, I think just to take away from this, is that, you know what? You care for your brothers and sisters around you. You encourage them. You try to help them. But in the end, you can't make them do these things. And you sometimes look at them and think, why they this and why me that? And as Jesus is saying, you, that's your concern. You make sure you are where you're supposed to be. And you do the things that are set before you. And you experience those things. And if I've determined something different for that guy, then don't worry about the fact that I had a different thing for him. And I think that's important. We'd all like to live, for some crazy reason, to a ripe old age, be still in good health, and comfortable, and sit down in our chairs some evening and have our cup of coffee and then just quietly pass away in our sleep. But that's not what God's chosen for all of us. And we have friends that happens to, and we have friends that die some very hard deaths, very long, drawn-out deaths. I mean, there's just all kinds of things we go through in life. There's some of us that may live a long time, but we live for a long time with physical problems, and that's what God's determined for us. And I think that that's another very honest takeaway from this text. And I don't think I'm reading something in there. It's Jesus' straightforward words to Peter. And I think we ought to listen to those in terms of, sometimes we're that same guy. What about that guy? You worry about yourself, Peter. Or in this case, you worry about yourself, Tim. Hope that this is helpful, encouraging, thinking about your situation, thinking about the word follow. As always, have a great day in the Lord, and thank you for joining me.